if you want to get better, you have to be willing to die. And I looked at him, and I said, well, I'm not. So, and he goes, then you won't recover.
That is a great exchange. Yeah.
I just like matter of fact, like, well, I'm not willing to die. And he's like, well, then you'll have OCD for the rest of your life. You can go home if you want.
This is Everybody Has a Brain, where we explore the experience of having a human brain. This week, my guest is Kelly Renee, and I really want to learn about Kelly's experience getting over OCD and building great mental health skills to handle even the worst things the brain can throw up. We've been interacting, I'd say probably for many years, around recovery and mental health skills online. This is Kelly Renee, a writer, mental health cheerleader, and we are going to explore Kelly's journey tonight. And of course, Kelly too has been creating the words and the voiceover for the videos we've been posting on the Toolkit channel about explaining mental health with animals. Super creative. Really, you share tons of really interesting mental health skills on all your social media channels. So yeah, Kelly, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Mark. I'm excited to be here.
Kelly, how did you, what was your journey to becoming a mental health cheerleader and even, just sharing about mental health online?
Yeah. So I always like to say that I think my mental health journey had like two start points. The start point that I was aware of, and then the start point many years before that, which I think is true for a lot of people. So I first kind of became aware that maybe something wasn't quite right the day that my son was born. So up until that point, I would never have identified myself as having mental health problems or struggles. And then quite literally the moment that my son was placed into my arms, I kind of had this like all-consuming fear that if I slept, he could die. And, I didn't like tell anyone, that I was thinking that. And it's so strange to me now looking back, because I feel like that thought to me at the time felt very real and very reasonable, which when I say that now, or to most people, they're like, that's a crazy, thing to think. Like your consciousness is nowhere linked to your son's, ability to live. But it did feel so real to me at the time, like a very real risk. And so I actually ended up staying awake, long story short, for 36 hours after he was born. I stayed up for 36 hours straight. And this was after a 36-hour labor. So I had been awake for many days. At that point, like my blood pressure started going up, and they started to be really concerned about me physically, because it started showing that I wasn't doing so well. And I kind of just like sucked it up together. And I was very good at masking when I was struggling. I think a lot of people are good at that when they're struggling. And so, I ended up getting myself discharged, and then I went on to struggle for, I think, 2 years before I actually started seeking help, because I just kind of was in this weird space of maybe this is normal. Maybe this is what new motherhood is supposed to be like. And, you are supposed to worry about your kids, right? That's normal. Obviously I was taking it to an extreme. And I had lots of compulsions during that time. But yeah, I started seeing a postpartum mental health specialist. And I was originally diagnosed with postpartum anxiety because I wasn't really sharing a lot of what was happening in my head, and most of my compulsions were in my head. So that's why you see me talk a lot about mental compulsions. I don't differentiate the way we treat them, right? We don't treat them any differently than physical compulsions, but I totally understand that like mental compulsion space, because that was really my experience. And it wasn't until I was seeing I kind of cycled through a couple of therapists, because I wasn't really getting help, because I wasn't being treated for OCD. And I was in a session one day, and arguably I would say I was maybe getting worse, because as we know, talk therapy for somebody with OCD can sometimes just give me all that reassurance. Yeah. I was very good and really liked therapy. There was the wrong kind of therapy though. So yeah, I was in session one day and I mentioned something very offhandedly. I said, and got up in the morning to make coffee, but my cup wasn't clean and I had to wash my cup. And my therapist was an amazing woman who said, I'm sorry, I want you to backtrack. What do you mean by your cup? Do you just have one? I don't know how she caught that, because what I was doing was I had a compulsion. I only used one coffee mug. I had been given for Mother's Day.
Yep.
And I had a belief that if I didn't use that mug, something really terrible would happen to my son. And so I literally used the same coffee mug every single day. I washed it every single morning. And I have a cabinet full of mugs and I just always use the same one. And I never even identified that as being strange, and nobody around me is like, oh, it's just her favorite mug, because nobody was ever aware of what was happening in my head around using that mug and why it was so important for me to use that mug. And so her being able to pick up on that just strange turn of word or phrase was so crucial, because she started asking the right questions. I was diagnosed with OCD on the spot. And then she was not trained in OCD. So she graciously stepped down and said, I'm not going to be the right person to treat you, referred me over to a therapist who was skilled in ACT. And kind of the rest is history. It wasn't like, oh, I just got better really fast. I had still some years ahead of me in terms of my recovery journey. But once I was introduced to the ACT principles, things changed pretty quickly after that. Relative to the journey before that. But the journey where it actually started, like I mentioned before, I would say I was really young. I think I now trace back some of the compulsions, that had nothing to do with my son. I had lots of different compulsions in my life that I would do, even as a young child. And I also had some trauma in my childhood too, that caused me to grow up really fast. I was kind of one of those kids, you're an old soul. It's like, no, I don't have trauma.
Yeah.
But I think, a lot of it can be traced back there. So it kind of had two start points, the one I was aware of, and then sort of the groundwork that was laid before that.
Oh, that totally makes sense. There's so much in there that I'd love to unpack, because too, I've never heard that story. And that is so excellent that the therapist was able to catch that, because that's such a great example of those kind of normal compulsions that we don't, well, no, but this is just the cup and everything is safer if I just use this cup. So why not just use the cup? What's wrong with that? It's easy to access and I can clean it every day. How did you, when that was first brought up, were you open to that being, oh yeah, maybe I could use other cups? Or did that seem?
No,
yeah,
no. I was and that was the first, she was like, I think the question she asked, what would happen if you didn't use the cup?
Yeah, that's great.
The look on my face answered that question. I was like, just horrified.
Why would you do that? That's insane.
Are you trying to murder my child? And that was pretty much where she's like, wow, you have OCD. Oh my God, you have OCD. All this time I've been treating you for generalized anxiety disorder. Everyone's been treating you for generalized anxiety disorder and postpartum anxiety. And by the way, my son was 4 at this time, and they're still calling it postpartum anxiety, which is rather a stretch. And
well, it's all postpartum.
Yeah, technically, I'm still postpartum.
Yeah.
So she was just, and we're actually great friends now today.
Yeah.
It's so funny to me that she stepped down as my therapist, but we just really hit it off personally. And I think I took some time away from, being around her while I was still working on myself. But once I came back to being recovered, it was I'm just eternally grateful to her for being the type of therapist who was just really listening. And then even more so, the type of therapist with the integrity to recognize when she wasn't the right fit for me, given the new information we had. That just will always earn my respect, getting me into the right treatment plan, because she knew that it wasn't her.
What was that treatment like when you got started on it? Was it because we actually had a question on the Discord server. Member was wondering, yeah, was it kind of structured? How did it go once you got into, treatment that was useful for cutting out the compulsions?
Sure. So I like to say that I stumbled a little bit. I found ACT and I went into a PM class, like it was like a outpatient, I guess, kind of program. It was only 2 hours. It was like 2 hours a night for 4 days a week, which is rather intense still.
Yeah.
But it was available through my local behavioral health hospital. I'm really, really fortunate to have a really wonderful behavioral health hospital near me. A lot of people are familiar with Dr. Patrick McGrath. He's kind of a well-known in OCD circles, and he actually runs the behavioral health hospital that's in my network and in my area. So I'm very fortunate to have access to that. And it is a very, for the OCD program, it is an ACT modeled program, which is awesome. But I went to that evening program, and I just, in hindsight, I kind of feel like I was just not ready yet. I wanted to be better, but I liken it to, I'm a former smoker. I was a very, very heavy smoker, which really surprises a lot of people now because I am very health conscious now. And so people are like, wow, I smoked 2 packs a day for over a decade. And I knew it was bad, and I knew I needed to quit, and I knew that there were ways to quit, but it just took me time to get to the point where I was like, okay, I'm doing it. I'm doing it now. My mental health journey and my recovery journey was kind of the same way. You really have to want it because it is hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, it's not easy, right? You're really changing the way that your brain is wired. You're changing the way that you've done things for maybe most of your life, all of your life. And you are willingly putting yourself in a position to face some of the toughest emotions that you will ever face.
Yep.
If you're not ready to go on that journey, then, you may find it difficult to continue. And I did. And I say that not to discourage people, but to also show people that if you stumble, that's okay. You can come back and you can try again. And you can do that as many times as you need to until you find success. Yeah. And I went into that first program. I was discharged. I was better. And a year later, I experienced a major trauma in my life. I lost my daughter. I was 22 weeks pregnant with Clara. She had spina bifida myelomenigoceal, which is the most severe form of spina bifida, and had to go through the just absolutely gut-wrenching experience of losing her. And I think that kind of sent me into a tailspin. Yeah. And I went after that happened. I think maybe like 6 months or so after that happened, I was hospitalized for my mental health because I just was kind of like done. Like I was just not functioning anymore at that point. And in that program, in that hospital, I mean, I've talked about it before, I wasn't there for very long. I think I was there for about a week. And, but I had a nurse who came up to me and she was the best. She patted me on the hand one day, and I was distraught most of the time that I was there. And she asked me if I'd ever heard of Norman Deutsch and the concept of neuroplasticity. And I think what she saw was, I think I turned the corner in the hospital. Something about that experience and being there, and kind of like that was my rock bottom in so many ways, and being away from my husband and my kids and physically not being able to like touch them and hug them and kiss them and, be around them was a rock bottom moment for me. And I just realized like, no, I really want to get better. Like that was the moment that I kind of had that, like, as a smoker, I decided I'm going to quit, flush your cigarettes down the toilet. That was my cigarettes down the toilet moment. I was like, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to recover. And she, I think, kind of saw that light go off and asked me if I'd ever heard of neuroplasticity and introduced me to Norman Deutsch. That was actually one of the first authors I had read on this concept of changing the way that our brains are wired. I went back into the same program that I did before, only instead of 2 hours a day, it was 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., 5 days a week. It was intensive. I was discharged out of the hospital into an outpatient program that was all day. Again, I am immensely fortunate that I have a wonderful day job that allowed me to take a leave of absence in order to work on myself, and, you know, just had access to this program that was great. And I went there and I just hit it so hard. I had a great caseworker who introduced me to Dr. Stephen Hayes in that program. I started learning a lot more about ACT, and I started really diving into those principles while also really studying neuroplasticity and learning about the science behind changing our brains. And it was kind of those two things together, really getting excited about brain science. And I always joke that, like, I'm a person who has a favorite neuroscientist, which is maybe a strange thing to say. Mine is Dr. Oliver Sacks, in case you guys were wondering.
Yeah.
So I just hit it so hard, but I had turned that corner and I was ready. And I think for people who are struggling and who have maybe tried lots of times and come up against those difficult emotions and just feel like this is too hard, I can't do it. You know, it's okay if you have those moments, and it's okay if you have those setbacks. It doesn't mean that you're never going to recover. Your journey might just be a little bit like mine, and it might take a couple attempts before you hit that moment. And hopefully it's not rock bottom, but before you hit that moment, you know, inspires you to knuckle down.
That journey is, you know.
Thank you. And
yeah.
you know, it was hard. So after I
Yeah.
finished the program, I went to a therapist. I discharged out of the program, and I just went to a therapist who was skilled in ACT principles, and I continued to work with her. So it's not like I went to this program and in 6 weeks I was better. You know? Yeah, I did it. It wasn't like that at all. But I did a lot of really intensive work during that time and confronted a lot of, fears. I would say during that time, I learned about myself more than learned skills. I learned more about myself in program. And then I went to work with the therapist who was kind of a continuation of that work. And that's where I really started practicing the skills. And, you know, what I loved about my therapist, and I still tell her this, is that she was a hard ass. She was such a hard ass. And I needed that. It was so different than the kind of coddly talk therapy that I was used to, which was like, made space for me to kind of flail around. She didn't really make space for that. She called me out when I was asking for reassurance. You know, like, we're always joking on the discard, we're gonna come set your house on fire. That was very
it's useful.
Yes, it's so useful. Just mildly threaten people when they're not doing it right. So, but she was like that. She was really tough with me, and I needed that. And she didn't sugarcoat things for me. And the other thing I liked was she really recognized my own, the way that I learn. And I think if people can spend some time paying attention to how you learn, whether that's by reading or by writing. So I'm a journaler. And for me, when I am learning something, it helps me so much to write it out, to write about it. And she would see me in session, like the wheels like turning like really slowly, like I'm just not getting something, you know. And she would just say, I want you to go home and write about this. And I would go home and take whatever skill it was that we were talking about, and I would just dump into my journal about what I thought, and just free write what I thought about it, and why it was stupid, and why she was wrong. And, you know, and a couple of pages later, I'd be like, oh, you know, then I get it. So learning style and understanding my own learning style was also, you know, really useful.
That's so important, and even makes me think of when you were mentioning all of that talk therapy for years too. Like, this is a real problem, I would say, in the mental health care system, that it is this one style of approaching a problem, which just in reality, most people, that's not how they approach a problem. They don't say, okay, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to talk this over with one other person. That's just, yeah, that's some people's way of learning, but not everybody's. one of the things too, I love you brought up having a favorite neuroscientist too, because it does make it seem like that we should have playing cards. Also, it tells you just like having a favorite player. This is the thing. There is so many different approaches to working on this stuff, and yeah, we do gravitate towards particular approaches that then make sense with our way of learning and way of tackling challenges. And just like, yeah, if you have a favorite player in a sport, yeah, nobody tells you because tells us a bit about you as a person. Like you really like defense, or you really like the person who's always scoring the offense, and that's so useful because yeah, this stuff is. There are, as we go on this journey, a lot of different ways to approach it. Also, because we've had so many different experiences, and then as you were sharing that, so much of that also gets wrapped up in traumatic experiences we've had. One of the areas where we've seen a lot of questions coming up lately is around acceptance. And I know, so yeah, you were working on accepting stuff here. I know you shared a post on Instagram the other day about practicing radical acceptance.
Yeah.
And yeah, what is radical acceptance? I always want to make jokes about like, how is it different from effervescent acceptance or smooth acceptance? No, but yeah, what is radical acceptance? And yeah, what was your experience of working on acceptance with like, yeah, thoughts which were about family members getting harmed, which yeah, so many people struggle with.
Yeah. So I like to call it radical acceptance, or I like to call it dangerous acceptance, because
dangerous acceptance.
Get the goosebumps going.
Yeah, I want to go and do that right now. Yeah.
It does feel dangerous though, right?
Yeah.
The things that we are being asked to accept as part of our recovery journeys can feel dangerous. And so I typically struggled, have now unpacked so many compulsions, but typically struggled with health-related OCD.
Okay.
So a lot of my fears and compulsions were around the health of my youngest son and myself. And I was constantly in the ER for getting checked for like, if I'm having a heart attack or if I'm having a pulmonary embolism. Those were two of my favorites, and kind of constantly just felt like I might be having a heart attack. And and when I say that I was in the ER a lot, I've been recovered now for, I think 3 years. I just now paid off my hospital bill. I think earlier this year, I paid off my hospital bill from, and I know that's not something you have to worry about, Mark, but
for our viewers, not in America, a hospital bill is a thing they give you at the hospital. It's like a Band-Aid, but not as useful.
Very expensive.
Very expensive. But yeah, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
This is something that doesn't maybe get talked about enough, is that actually struggling with this stuff can be extremely expensive.
Yeah, I was very, very in debt to the US medical system. And that was exclusively because of OCD, because every time I went to the ER, it cost me $300. That's just my personal medical plan. That's how much it costs for me to go to the ER. So every time I went to the hospital, it was $300, and I was there a few times a month, maybe. So just do a little math, and struggling for 6 years or so, a few times a month in the ER, was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But just to give people an idea of like, how problematic that can be. Not only was it's very inconvenient to have OCD, but it was I was bleeding money at the same time. But anyways, so I had a lot of fears around my health. And so accepting those fears felt really dangerous, because especially like, let's take the heart attack example. I like to use this one a lot because I think it's I think it's kind of common. And two, I think it's a great example of people will make excuses in order to not accept things. Or fears about things, because it could, better safe than sorry, right? I mean, what if you actually are having a heart attack, Mark? Like you need to go get checked because you could die.
And the brain is like, here are 50 reasons why, like, this is really happening right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I really struggled with acceptance, because acceptance meant taking a risk. And I felt with my health and with that of my child. You think it's scary to not go get yourself checked. What if you think your child is ill or in some sort of dangerous, what if you have a fear that that's happening? And I'm asking you to accept that that might be a possibility, and then not go do the compulsion of getting them checked. So, I would be like, well, that would make me a bad mom. Like I'm a bad mom. And so it was very, very challenging to learn how to practice acceptance in those situations. And, I had Dr. Patrick McGrath told me one time when I was in the program, said to me, if you want to get better, you have to be willing to die. And I looked at him, I said, well, I'm not. So, and he goes, then you won't recover.
That is a great exchange. Yeah.
I just matter of fact, well, I'm not willing to die. And he's like, well, then you'll have OCD for the rest of your life. You can go home if you want. I mean, he literally offered for me I was in the middle of my program, my day-long program. And he basically, it was like 11 a.m., not time. And he's like, you can just leave. So
that is so useful to have a doctor say that. And that is so rare.
I had tough love therapists that I worked with. And that he really was showing me in that moment, either you're here to do the work and you're here to learn, or you're not going to waste anybody's time. And I mean, I think I had to kind of get over my pride after that exchange. I was definitely ruffled. I was like, fine, I will go home then. Bye, But I came back, and I, he and I had a really great talk after that. And I said, okay, I don't know how to be willing to die. Can we start there?
Okay.
That's
a great question.
Right. I'm not willing to die right now, but I'm open to the idea of becoming willing to die. and he met me there, and, they met me there in program. And I wish that there was some way to explain acceptance to people, like, oh, just do this one little thing and you'll accept your greatest fears. But I just don't think that exists. I feel like for me, acceptance was something that I just had to keep trying at. And I had to have lots of experiences of sitting with high levels of anxiety, where, let's say I would notice symptoms, of a heart attack, and I would have the urge to go to the ER, and I would start having all of that chatter start up in my brain. We got to go check just to make sure you're going to leave your kids motherless. What if it is a heart attack this time? I want to point out really quick, what if it's blah this time is something I'd pay attention to. If your brain is saying that to you, but this time, that's sus. Okay. Yeah. Just, that's some internal chatter that I would be really suspicious of, and can be useful when you're working towards acceptance. But yeah, I would start to have that chatter, and I would have to make the choice.
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe this time it really is a heart attack. Anyways, what do you guys want for dinner?
Yeah. Be like, it's going to come.
Yeah. Might as well.
But at least you're going to have a good dinner.
Really. Right. Yeah. Right. And it's not that as though I wasn't terrified. I just told someone the other day, we were talking about acceptance, and I said, acknowledge whatever the fear it is that you have, accept that that's a possibility. Tell yourself, yeah, that could happen. And then go do something that's value driven. And if you are crying, shaking, freaking out while you're doing it, that's fine. That's fine. Cook dinner while sobbing. That's fine. Feel those feelings, but don't do anything to alleviate that sensation. Just do the things you need to be doing or want to be doing or should be doing, while allowing the fear of the terrible decision you've just made to marinate.
That, I feel, is a key thing. Actually, somebody had just watched the video that you just made. We called "What Are You Feeding Your Brain?" but really about giving your brain something valued to go after. and somebody who had watched it had posted on the Discord server about how they had been approaching like anxiety and difficult feelings as this thing they were supposed to only sit with and not go on to do something they valued until the feeling subsided. And I have seen a lot of professionals posting about doing ERP, even putting specific numbers on it, like waiting until anxiety goes to like 73.5%, and then you can move on. But yeah, I found what was more useful was the approach you were describing, which is no, you go and do something that you value and you have that feeling while you go and do the thing. And so yeah, if you're crying and making dinner, awesome. Like let's make space for that. Like that can be there. If you're super anxious and you're giving a presentation, wonderful. And not that it's okay to have these feelings. We don't have to even put life on hold to go and like feel them separate from these lives we're living.
Yeah, like acceptance isn't passive, right? I think a lot of people, that's the misconception, right? That acceptance is like a passive behavior, and acceptance is an active behavior. It is arguably the most active mental health behavior that we engage in, because acceptance is the process of allowing what's ever in our brains to be in our brains while we then go do the stuff that makes our lives worth living. That's the key to acceptance. And I think people get, and maybe we need a better term, for acceptance. Acceptance feels like I have to like it, I have to want it, I have to be okay with it. I will tell you guys now, there is no part of me that is okay with having a heart attack. I didn't just suddenly become okay with having a heart attack. It's not like, oh, that'll be cool. Like, that's not what acceptance is. Acceptance is my recognition that there are experiences in this life or things that may happen to me or could happen to me that I don't have any control over. And even if you could make the argument like, well, you can have some control over not having a heart attack, Kelly. I don't want to dedicate my life to not having a heart attack. And that's what I was doing before. I was dedicating my life to my fears. I was dedicating all of my time and energy into making sure that my fears didn't come true, checking to make sure that they weren't in the process of coming true, putting into place all of these things that were keeping them from coming true. That's what I spent all my time on. And that isn't the life that I wanted for myself. And acceptance was about pulling those things back, finding the stuff that really mattered to me and doing it no matter what was happening in my head.
Congratulations on doing that. Yeah.
Thanks. There's a lot of knitting.
Yeah. Just knit. Well, because I think even you always, the irony of health anxiety is that, as a reaction to the fear of ending up in the hospital, we end up spending a lot of time. Like I remember I used to have all sorts of compulsions around getting blood tests for fear. So I spent far more time getting tested for things that I didn't have than I probably would have if I actually had those things.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh no, this will interfere. This will interfere with my life. There's a couple things actually. I know a lot of people too. I see in the Twitch chat, just saying how much they appreciate everything you're saying as well. Yeah, even I just saw. Congrats! What a great journey, but also really, really appreciative of everything. Yeah, you've shared there. Even I want to say a shout out. I see Emperor Sean stopping by for the first time, mentioned I had OCD real bad, but it's not as bad as it used to be. Pupper Potato saying, Kelly, you speak so beautifully about your experience. And even, I see D-Web too, just saying, hey, what, actually even Sean mentioning there, kind of OCD not being as bad as it used to be. As you were explaining that, you mentioned being recovered for several years now. And we love this topic. So one, OCD not being chronic, but two, talking about recovery. What even, like, let's I'll play myself for a moment and act like I have no idea what recovery is. How would you define recovery?
Okay, so yes. Say it with me now, everybody. OCD is not chronic.
OCD is not chronic.
Yes. Yeah, recovery to me is defined as I'm living the life that I want to live without being bothered or controlled by my thoughts, feelings, emotions, that sort of thing. I'm not, I choose. It's a choose my own adventure, and I'm actually choosing it. So that's the way that I define recovery. And I get a lot of questions about recovery because a lot of people want to know, well, do you still have anxiety? Do you still have fears? Are you just totally fearless now? Do you get like a special badge and a private unicorn when you recover? Like,
sounds amazing.
Yeah. And I did
Yeah.
badge and a unicorn. So look for yours in the mail if you haven't gotten already.
I will.
But no, I'm not, of course, I'm not devoid of anxiety. We know from your book, Mark, that fears are part of being human because we are not rocks. And of course, I have anxiety. I like to use the example, and I think this really resonates with parents or maybe like people who have pets, that anxiety is the reason that like you notice when your kids are sick or when your pet is not doing well or acting funny, and it prompts you to then go check that out, right? Like, do I need to take their temperature, or do I need to, feel their forehead or ask them if they're okay? Or do I need to take them to the doctor or to the vet? Do I need to, like, I don't know, this is gross, but whatever, like look at my dog's poop. Does the poop look weird?
Yeah.
This is part of being a dog owner. So, anxiety is what causes you to do those things. And we would never balk at that, right? If he was doing that, we wouldn't be like, you have an anxiety problem. Instead, that is somebody displaying anxiety in a useful, helpful way. Anxiety is an informative emotion. I think a lot of emotions that people refer to as negative or bad are really just informative. They're typically signaling to us that something that we care about is being threatened. And so, I'm not devoid of anxiety. I experience anxiety when my kids are sick, when my dogs are sick, if a car is appearing to come way too fast in one direction, I experience anxiety, yes. I just am not like ruled by it anymore. I'm able to recognize what I need to do because of it, if anything, and if there's nothing, I don't do anything. I shared an example recently on Instagram when we were traveling. My youngest son was nauseous the first day, and my husband and I were texting in the hotel room because we didn't want to wake him up. And I just texted my husband, I am anxious, and he texted back to me, go to sleep, which was the most beautiful sign of a partner that doesn't give reassurance. But also it was like, he was kind of in his way reminded me like, yeah, you're anxious, duh. Like your 9-year-old he's nauseous and we're in a hotel room in the middle of New York.
Yeah. This
is a normal time to feel a little bit like, oh, what's going to happen? It doesn't mean we need to do anything about it. Go to sleep, So, and I laughed so loud that I think I woke my son up because it was like, I got it. Like, oh yeah, thank you. But yeah, I think that's what you can see in recovery is not that you are devoid of fear and you don't suddenly become fearless, but you will start to notice maybe there's space in between you and your feelings and your thoughts, and you can then choose to fill that space with whatever action you deem appropriate, desirable, whatever you think is right.
Yeah, I think that example you gave there too, it is so true that the brain has this amazing capacity to register things that are threatening to the stuff we care about. Like there is this element of the brain that, packed away in all the squishy stuff, where it just keeps this catalog of like, here are the things that Kelly really cares about. And if I notice any of these things being not perfect, I'm gonna set off an alarm.
Yeah.
And it just does that. Like that's the thing it does. And I think we're like, I know looking back now, I can see, so many of the intrusive thoughts that came up, they were around, like things I cared about, things I wanted to prevent. The brain was in its own weird way trying to be useful. And, but then me, I don't know, like it's a mix of, the alarm going off too quickly, but then me also thinking that the alarm going off is like the worst possible thing.
Yeah.
And life has to be put on hold while we unplug the smoke alarm, which is just going off very naturally because something is burning on the stove. And and I guess it is that over time, like you were talking about neuroplasticity before, it does seem that part of it is that threshold at which it goes off starts to get moved. Like we change the point at which the smoke detector is going to go off. Whereas, when we're struggling, it goes off over anything because, of course, we are going to leap into action and solve it. And then with time showing it, no, like, it can go off right now and we can go to sleep.
Yeah. Imagine that, going to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Like 5 minutes. It took me, 5 minutes. I was like, oh, you're right. I'm so tired. Thank you for checking me. And I think too, I describe, and this is, I love neuroplasticity in a way that's maybe weird. But I like to describe it as like a hiking path. Let's say you've been hiking this one path and it leads to a cliff edge, and you've just been hiking yourself into a pit filled with like spiky rocks and snakes. And you do it over and over and over and over. And that's the path. And that's the path you go on. You wake up every day, you put on your boots, and you walk yourself into a pit of spiky rocks and snakes every day.
Yep.
Because the path is there and you may as well go on it, right? It's
But before.
There's so neuroplasticity is like, we see a lovely grove in the distance, but there is all kinds of overgrowth and weeds and rocks and tree roots and, stuff in the way. And when we are intentionally choosing our behaviors and choosing acceptance and making those choices about how we are going to behave, we are hacking a path towards where we want to be. And you know what? It's not easy, right? Like doing that work and swinging that machete is so hard and you get so tired. And sometimes you might get a little snag on a thorn and a rock might stub your toe and a tiger comes out and bites your face. I don't know. It's not hard. It's hard, right? It's work. And you look back every once in a while and you see that well-trodden path and you're like, God, it'd be so much easier to just walk on that. But it ends in spiky rocks and snakes. Don't go down that path. And some days you might wake up in the morning and you might lace your boots up and you might find yourself walking down that path because you just were tired and you weren't really paying attention. And you might find yourself halfway down that path. And then you go, wait a minute. And then you turn around and you pick up your machete and you get back on the new path that you're carving. And it feels like really hard work and you just keep at it. And then one day you've been working at that new path for so long and you look back and you realize that the old path has started to grow over. And now the tree roots are on that path and the rocks are on that path. And the tiger moved his home and he's over there biting somebody else's face now. And you are creating this new path, which is now becoming very, very smooth and easy to walk on. And you wake up in the morning and you lace your boots and you get up and you start walking that path because it's easier and it's accessible and you've worked to make it so. That's what recovery looks like. It doesn't look like I just woke up one day and I figured out acceptance and now I'm in heaven and it looks like doing that work. And it looks like sometimes giving up and going on the wrong path. Even the day, just like 2 weeks ago, when I sent my husband that text message, I am anxious. I laced my boots up and I was kind of starting to get on that path a little bit. And his text to me was like, oh, wait, I don't like this path. This path is stupid. I haven't been on that path in 3 years. What am I doing? And, sometimes those old neural pathways are still there, even for those of us who have been recovered for a long time. We sometimes will just, especially I notice when I'm tired, which I was, you will sometimes find yourself and you're like, I don't do this anymore. I don't walk this way anymore. And you're always capable of turning around and getting back on the path that you want to be on. But at the beginning, it's going to feel really hard to be on that path and really easy to be on the other one. And the neuroplasticity thing is, as you begin to carve the new path, the easier it makes your brain, the brain will make it easier for you to stay on that path. but it all starts with making those first steps and those first, cuts, and they are the hardest ones.
That's an amazing metaphor. No, yeah, that's so useful to recognize, especially coupling it with what you were talking about earlier, in that, yeah, the first time that we start to take that other path, we're also convinced that, oh no, like we've been told, oh, you can't go that way because you'll die.
Oh yeah.
Even though we have all of this evidence that going down this other path keeps throwing us into this spiky pit, we're like, oh no, this is the better path, but you can't go that way. What helped with sticking with it when it was difficult? I think that's a challenge everybody runs into, because you so perfectly captured it there. Like the other path is easy, even though we hate the outcome, or it's like, oh, but I know it. What really helped with like grabbing that machete, the chainsaw, the flamethrower, and hacking your way through that new path?
So the values work, I would say, was really, really impactful for me. Getting very clear on what I wanted in my life. And it doesn't have to be, I think sometimes when we talk about values, people are like, that's this big concept. And I don't know, do I want to be an astrophysicist? Like, it really doesn't have to be that big. Okay. Do you like flowers?
Yeah.
Are you into coloring? It can really be small. What makes you feel good? You can work on bigger things as you go. But for today, from whatever place you're in, what makes you feel really good? What makes you feel like I am myself right now? What makes you feel home, like coming home to yourself? Asking those questions and getting really clear on those things was really helpful for me. And then designing behaviors that supported those things. So for me, I love to be outdoors in nature. I am most happy when I am knee deep in dirt. And, that's just who I am. I like to hike. Want to hike up a mountain every day of my life. Okay, well, I like to be outside. What are some value-driven behaviors? What are some behaviors that are aligned with that value of being outside and in nature? Okay, I can garden. I can go for a walk. I could do yard work. I could build snowmen with my son, because outside doesn't just stop being outside in winter. I can do all of these things, and I can kind of come up with these behaviors that scratch that itch a little bit. And you can do that with all different kinds of things that you value in your life. So I literally had a list of value-driven behaviors. I wrote them out, a whole list of value-driven behaviors. Then I took a hour-by-hour chart, midnight to 11 p.m., and made like a little Excel spreadsheet. And in every single hour of that chart, I put a value-driven behavior that was feasible for that hour of the day. So if it was 2 a.m, I'm not going to go dig in my garden, but maybe I'll knit, or maybe I'll read a book, or maybe I'll do some writing in my journal. And I would come up with some behaviors for all hours of the day, all days of the week, all the kind of circumstances. And I literally gave myself a grab bag. And this was when I was really, really early in my recovery. Like, I was really still struggling. And the reason I did that was because oftentimes when we are in the middle, if you're in the middle of spiraling or having a moment where you're trying to accept, maybe I'm having a heart attack and I'm not going to go to the ER, I'm determined, I've made the decision, and you're supposed to engage in a value-driven behavior. But if you literally think you're dying, then you're not going to be like, oh, I'll just pick up my knitting here. Yeah, like, it is so hard in that moment to think of what you should be doing. So doing that pre-work ahead of time and giving yourself literally a piece of paper that you can grab and pull it up and go, okay, it's 4 p.m. I'm freaking out. I can walk the dog. Let's go, Murphy. Let's go, Milo. And there you go. And you go just do that thing. And you do it like we said before, while you're crying, shaking, freaking out. It gave me a really tangible tool that I could pick up and in the moment redirect myself to a value-driven behavior while allowing the feelings to be there, while allowing the thoughts to be there, when I wasn't in a mental space to come up with those things for myself. And what happened was, the more that I did that, the better I got at it, and the less I needed the list. And then I was kind of starting to come home to myself through these behaviors and starting to really get familiar with who I was and what I liked and what I wanted to be doing. So when I would start freaking out, I was much easier, that I was inadvertently starting to carve that path, and I was able to start choosing behaviors that were easier without the list anymore.
Yeah, you touched on something that I find really interesting there. Because did you know what you valued before?
No.
Yeah.
No, I could never, before I went into the recovery work, before I really started doing ACT principles and started working with my therapist, I think I would have told you things I liked. And that I've come to notice that that's not the same as the things that I value.
This is a great thing to explore. Yeah, how? Explain, because I think this is key. Yeah.
Yeah. So like the things that I like, I mean, like, I don't know, I like rock hounding. I am a rock hound. I like to collect rocks. I like rocks and cool. My rock hounding hobby is something that I just enjoy doing. It's fun. It is outside and it does, get me out there, but it's not hitting like that innermost part of me. I don't feel like it's connecting me with my purpose. Things that I value are things that really make me feel like myself. And it's kind of hard to articulate, but these are the things that make me feel like I am really self-actualizing. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm giving of myself to the world, or I am touching something that's greater than myself. When I am really engaging with my values, that's how I feel. And it can honestly even be something like, this may sound silly, but like knitting for me is almost like spiritual. And I feel like when I'm knitting or when I am engaging in something like that, I'm creative. I'm creating something with my own two hands. I'm engaging in a craft that has a history that goes back, eons. And in a way, I am communing with knitters of the past. And I sometimes even knit patterns that are hundreds of years old. Which is very, very cool. And, so that's kind of like one of those small, you wouldn't really think that that's value driven, but for me, it really is super value driven. I think one that's maybe more obvious is writing, and the work that I do, the mental health work I do is obviously very value driven for me, because I'm using my talents and my skills to help other people. And that I think is more obvious for people, like seeing that as being value driven, but being able to see the way that even things like knitting can be value driven if they light your soul up, if they feel special and impactful to you, and if they feel like in this moment I am 100% myself. Those are the things that that I think mark the difference between things I like and things I value. And some of them are more obvious. Spending time with my family is something I value. I'm trying to raise wonderful people, future adults. And that's something that matters to me, is leaving a legacy of kind, empathetic, inclusive, lovely men in the world. That is who I am raising. And so spending time with my sons allows me to, touch on that. And I just think values work is really impactful in recovery, because if you want to be better, if you want to be someplace different, right, than you maybe are right now, you first need to define where that someplace is and what that someplace looks like. And that starts with asking yourself those questions about what matters to me and what lights me up and what makes me me, and get really aspirational about it, because it's really fun to kind of dream and imagine who you could be, and then imagine what types of things you could do to get you there.
Some of those things will take us down paths that are difficult.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll think they're difficult, but they'll actually be way easier than going into the spiky rock pit. There's I know a question here in the chat about values. And even on the spiky rock pit, I know Joe just pointed out, you'd think your fears won't follow you into the idiot spike pit, but they do. Exactly, because I guess that's why we throw ourselves into it, because we're like, oh no, but I'm gonna get rid of the thing I'm afraid of. And they love it down there.
They do.
The question here on values is, what if the OCD tells you not to do the value because you can't do it because doing it will ruin everything. You know it's OCD, but your belief is to you, it's rational.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. So that's kind of like I said, earlier, where I said I had this belief when my son was born that if I went to sleep and he would die.
Mm-hmm.
That probably sounds totally wild to most of you, all of you, hopefully. To me, that felt very rational. So again, in this moment, I would say, you are experiencing resistance to practicing your values because it feels dangerous to do so. Practice dangerous acceptance, right?
Yes.
Just do it. And it's going to feel dangerous.
Yeah.
It can feel dangerous while you do it. It can ruin everything while you do it. But if it's value driven for you, if it matters to you, if it feels like coming home to yourself and creating the life that you want to live, and if those behaviors feel like that's who you are and that's who you want to be and that's the type of things that you want to have in your life, then I don't see any reason why you wouldn't do those things. Maybe you need to ruin everything in order to get the life that you want. I don't know.
Yeah, it's because I don't know, Star Jesse, you asked that if you were here earlier, check out the stream later, because Kelly was talking about when she was working on recovery, something the doctor asked her about wanting to die. So check that part out later.
Yes.
If you missed it. I know Tosage brought up a great point, going back to likes and values. They say, I think you can like your compulsions. I don't know if you can truly value them. And that, I think, is, yeah. What do you think about that, Kelly?
So good. That's great. That's spot on. I like that a lot. That's a great way of looking at it.
Totally. I liked all my compulsions. And I thought they were all rational.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Super rational.
Yeah. Yeah. And very likable. Oh yeah, we're coming up on the end of time. Yeah, you've already got people that want to have dangerous acceptance t-shirts.
Yes, you guys, let's do it. I'll make them. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Acceptance.
Yeah. Oh, there's a question here. Emperor Sean, I see you asked about streaming. How often we do this? We do. Kelly, this is a special guest event that Kelly is joining us for, but we'll often do interviews and other streams on Wednesday nights, and then on weekends we do a mental health Q&A. So usually twice a week. And you asked a question. Oh, Gabby's going to take 20 of the Dangerous Acceptance t-shirts. And
Gabby!
No, that's a good start. The Emperor Sean, you asked, have you ever heard of anyone having OCD over eye contact? Oh, I definitely have. Kelly, yeah, what do you think about compulsions around eye contact?
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that. I've heard compulsions on all kinds of things. But sure.
The
is it avoiding or is it staring at that?
I find it depends. Like I know, so personally, I had a bunch of eye contact compulsions. So one was if I wanted to confirm that somebody liked me. So if I was really anxious about are people going to like me? I need to get people to like me. I would often have to go out and need to make eye contact with people. But then I know I also struggled with feeling wrong about eye contact, like needing to get it right, like so many things. Then it becomes, oh, what did I make eye contact for too long? Oh, are they going to think that means something? Oh, so I should make eye contact. But now I'm looking away. What's that mean? And
yeah.
Like anything though, it's just the usual. Oh, are you doing this thing wrong? What's gonna happen?
Yeah,
I control it.
I did that. I'm a comfortable eye contact person. Yeah, even now, I'm just a kind of an intense communicator, and so I really I'm been known to make really uncomfortable eye contact with people, and I have to remind myself people don't want you boring into their soul, Kelly. Take a step back.
Yeah. The Kelly, we'll wrap up here in a second. So I want to say one, thank you. The metaphor is phenomenal. The journey you've been on is so useful for people to hear about, to learn about. Yeah, learn about accepting these difficult things that we all run into struggling with. You've been getting more involved in sharing stuff about mental health. what are you excited about doing in, on this journey ahead of you?
Yeah, I'm currently creating on YouTube. Just my YouTube is really, or not my YouTube, sorry, Instagram is about sharing the things that worked for me. I was just talking with a friend earlier, and there's something about, I think, Mark, this is why I liked the content that you created so much, was because hearing these tips and skills from somebody who has actually applied them to OCD, to these things, is very different than hearing them academically explained by a therapist or in a program by somebody who maybe has not actually had the experience of what these look like in the life of someone with OCD. So I work on Instagram to kind of share those things with people and try to explain them in ways that I would have wanted them explained, or ways that, like somebody may have said it to me and this is how I interpreted it, and now I'm going to share it that way with you guys. So I'm doing that. I am writing a book as well about my experiences, and it's a lot. It's just kind of the same way that I talk tonight. So a lot of storytelling. I was a storyteller long before my OCD journey, and that's just sort of how I communicate. So I am writing a book about those experiences. And yeah, I'm still collaborating with people. I know we've been collaborating on making these videos, and I love finding new, fun, and creative ways to kind of get the word out and really help to create community. I found so much hope in the community, like around, like, let's say your YouTube channel and people like that coming together. I think there's so much power in seeing that you're not alone, and so much power in understanding that there are other people out there going through the same or similar things, because it allows you to kind of pull back from maybe those darkest moments where you feel like you don't have any hope and you're going to be like this forever. And so my main goal has always been to help create that same sense of community, that same sense of hope, that same sense of acceptance for people who are going through this and who are struggling and who maybe are failing at recovery like I did. I failed at first. I failed many times before I got it right. And getting the message out there that you can fail, but you can lace your boots back up and try again tomorrow.
Thank you for creating that space. Absolutely. You're doing that, sharing your stories and just the creative ways you have of explaining mental health, including Murphy, but also other animals. But yeah, that honesty and that storytelling, it does create space. So yeah, thank you for doing that. Because yeah, by doing that and sharing that so openly, you create the space for other people to step into that. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that with everybody tonight. I know we'll definitely, continue this conversation on Instagram, and we'll post this on YouTube later as well. But yeah, where can everybody find you on Instagram?
Yes, on Instagram, I am at Hey Kelly Renee, 2 E's.
Okay, we'll put that down in the description below afterwards too. And I know, yeah, a bunch of people in the chat saying, yeah, just thank you. And I'm just reading through the messages. Okay. Some people have offered that, yeah, you can stare into their soul.
Yes.
Yeah, they can handle it. But also just saying an inspiring, awesome story. And yeah, so thank you everybody in the chat for stopping by, joining in. Kelly, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. And yeah, thank you for sharing your story and creating that space for other people out in the wilderness.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.